you go.
What is up, guys? I hope you're well. My name is Mark, and today we're tackling some more r/entitled people. If you're new here, please consider hitting that like, that subscribe, and maybe that notification bell. And with that being said, let's get straight into today's stories. Much love, guys. Our first story comes from Cleopatra Rolled. An entitled family drops my baby sister and tries to blame me. So for a bit of background, I live with my grandparents in a city 5 hours away from my mum. I try to see my mum, stepdad and baby sister every so often, but since her birth in early spring 2019, I've only been able to see her 3 times. The first 2 times were normal encounters, but the most recent one was probably the scariest moment of my life. EK1, daughter, EK2, daughter 2, EM, entitled mum, me, Jane, fake name for sister. I'd driven out to go and see my family. I was planned to spend a week in July with them and everything went good, from the trip out to me getting acquainted with my old room. The next morning I had offered to take Jane into the city I live close to. I had some shopping to do and I thought the new sights would do her good. As parents of a newborn baby, my parents agreed instantly. I took Jane in her car seat to the city's mall and we went inside. After about 2 hours I was getting hungry, so was she. My mum was already training her on bottles, so in my backpack I stuck a few in just in case. She was getting fussy, so I needed to find a place fast, and I finally decided on a cheaper but decent restaurant the mall had to offer. She was hungry now, so I pulled a bottle out while ordering. A family of 4 was sitting across from me, 2 young girls and the parents. The girls were grinning and constantly turning to look and point at my sister, who was now fast asleep in her car seat. I didn't think much of it because kids get excited when they see babies, but the girls went from grinning to whining. I saw the mum stand up and walk over to me with the fakest smile I've ever seen. EM, sarcastically friendly voice. Hi, you have a beautiful baby, and I was wondering if my 2 girls could come say hello. I say, she's asleep right now. If she wakes up, they certainly can. But she might be asleep for a while. They just want to come see her, and they won't wake her. They'll keep up with their whining if you don't let them. I say, you know what? Sure, but please make sure they're quiet enough to keep her asleep. I was getting very anxious about now. The EM walked back to her table and bent over to talk to the girls who, seconds later, both had the biggest smile stretched across their faces. The girls jumped up and came over to my table, asking me the basic questions like, how old is she and what's her name? I kind of relaxed. I've always been scared that something will happen to her, and the girls seemed pretty sweet. The mum came over and her and I started to talk when I noticed one of the girls tried to reach into the seat and unbuckle my sister. I said, hey hun, please don't unbuckle her. The kid said, but why? I want to hold her, she's just so cute. I said, I don't really want you to hold her. This isn't a secure space, and I don't feel comfortable with your ability to hold her safely. I'm sorry. The girl kind of understood and gave me a, oh, okay, before her mum stepped in. I knew in the back of my head I was fucked the second I heard her speak. She said, excuse me, young man. My baby is perfectly capable of holding your baby. How dare you assume she can't? Etc. I said, I'm sorry, but I've always been squeamish about people holding her. And she cuts me off. EM is now raising her voice a bit so the tables near us are looking. My girls are perfectly capable of holding babies. How dare you assume they can't? Turning to her daughter. Here, sweetie, let me help you get her out. Her kids now go from whining to laughing and getting closer to her seat, which was a red flag for me. The woman was almost trying to keep me down so her kids could do what they wanted, but I was not having any of it. I now stand up and assert myself. I'm a pretty big guy. I'm 6'4" and I'm quite muscular for a teenage kid. I play rugby for a very high tier team, and we had a game before I came here, so my arms were slightly bruised. This is important later. The woman looks up at me and doesn't back down. She's fat as fuck and she refused to move. Her kids were going to hold the baby, and that was final. She gets right into my face and I'm trying to get by her. With the way my table was positioned, I was basically pinned into the corner between a booth and my table. I asked her to move and she refused. She said, I'm not leaving until my precious little girl gets to hold your baby. She'll be gentle, just watch. Both daughters are happy as fucking can be, while pawning at Jane, trying to get her out of her car seat. This woman helps her kid unbuckle my sister, and her child lifts the now crying baby into her arms. Have you ever seen a kid hold a cat under the armpits and the body slouches in? That's how she was holding my sister. I said, put her down, you're holding her wrong. I raised my voice now, my anxiety about this situation was through the roof. The first child says, Mummy, look, while the second child says, oh, she's so cute. I want a baby. Both kids keep gushing over her, and I notice that EK1 is holding her in the same position, but her arms are getting shaky. My sister's cries are getting even louder, and the staff are on their way now. 2 hosts, and who I assume was the manager, were on their way from the hostess stand. The mum is still keeping me cornered, and her kids are now passing my sister to each other. I still remember it like it was yesterday. Her daughter's arms gave out. She dropped my sister onto the ground of the restaurant. I saw red, and the girls looked at each other scared as hell, realising what had just happened. The mum also covered her mouth and tried to step out of my way almost innocently. I said, "Are you fucking kidding me? You stupid bitch. I told you your fucking kids had no right to touch my sister." I shoved the woman into the wall, hard enough to get her out of my way, and she bangs her head. I dove down to grab the wailing baby, who now sounds to be in intense pain. "I told you not to fucking grab her." The mum is sitting against the wall crying out in pain, and the girls are sobbing. All I saw was red, and I was full on ready to destroy this woman for letting her kids hurt my sister. The hostesses and the manager rushed to my side immediately and called an ambulance and the police. I was sitting there feeling absolutely helpless as my baby sister wailed and cried in the most pain cry that I've ever heard. The woman now screaming out saying I attacked her, and her children now by her side sobbing. She went on about how I'd given her a concussion and how she was assaulted. Other customers have now gotten up to see the commotion, and a few of them are just watching. When the ambulance arrived, my little sister was having trouble breathing. She was rushed away into an ambulance. The police came in and took statements and resolved the situation. I was taken out of the restaurant because I kept trying to attack this woman. When I calmed down, the police took my statement, and apparently this woman tried to say I punched her because she was trying to help me and tried to attack her kids, causing them to drop my baby, which apparently I told them to hold in the first place because I was busy, and that she was trying to protect my baby from my parents because of the bruises on my arms. The police asked to see my arms, and I showed the bruises, explaining they were from rugby. I gave my statement, and the police took statements from the bystanders. My parents were called, and when they arrived, they were filled in. My mum was enraged. She also tried attacking the woman, only to be held back by the cops. We for sure pressed charges, and my parents and I were given permission to leave to go to the hospital. I'm not sure what happened after, but I know the mum got arrested, and the kids were taken home by the dad, who the entire time was just sitting at their table casually. Our lawyer is currently thinking she could get a total of 6 charges for this. Hopefully she's going to get jail time. We got to the hospital and Jane was relatively okay. She had a broken leg and a problem with her breathing because of her lung experiencing some issues. I'm so glad this day nothing worse happened, and I'm waiting to hear the phone call that this bitch got locked behind bars. I'm sorry this is terrible formatting. This is my first post to Reddit, and I just thought to give it a shot. I'll edit and add the information about after the trial if people want it, but for now, I keep it as is. I now don't let anyone touch or go near Jane, and whenever I go out with her, I always have someone else with me. I'm just glad the cops held me and my mum back, or there would have been a few charges. Our next story is from Gummy Foot. Entitled father ends up being disowned by his daughter. So, to start off, I've never got along with my father. When I was younger, 4 to 8, I purposely tried to annoy him because I was done with him. I got spanked every time. The beginning of this story starts at the end of the message. It was 2014, during the South Snowmageddon. My father was bothering my mother over and over to pick him up from work while there was ice on the roads. His car wasn't working, he worked in an auto shop. So after a few miles down the road, my mother turned around and headed back home. I was in school, 6th grade at the time, and had absolutely no clue what was going on. What made it worse was my mother had my brother, 3rd or 4th grade, in the car with her while my father was being a total piece of shit, endangering his wife and son. So the divorce came around. I wasn't shocked, but it was sad because I was only 12. I stayed with my mother while my father continued to fool around with different women. He cried alligator tears when he saw my brother and I bawling our eyes out. He ended up moving out to an apartment complex in a not so good neighbourhood. The events that followed led up to my first psych hospital stay at 14. I was in a room and it was hot. I turned on the fan by pulling the chain. The glass cover on it hiding the light bulbs fell off and I instantly panicked. I called for him and he came into the room. I remember what he said clear as day. "What the hell did you do that for? I just got here and you're tearing up the place," he yelled as I shrank back into the room. At this point, I was panicking and sobbing. He put it back onto his fixture. He pulled the cord to turn the fan off, which I asked him not to do. The fixture fell once again and broke into 2 pieces. He sighed and looked at me saying, "If you didn't mess with it, it wouldn't have fallen the first time." My father had countless girlfriends and mistresses at the time. They cared more about me than my father did, as my father left me home alone with them. They played games with me, and I even did a crystal grown kit with one of them. One day, my father had an argument with his girlfriend. He called me inside as I was playing outside with the neighbourhood kids, which were considerably younger than me. The eldest was 10. I went in to see what was going on. "Girlfriend wants to talk to you," he said, and left the room. I began to panic internally, knowing he brought me into another one of his arguments. I sat in a car with her, and she was the first person I opened up to. I told her I was afraid of my father. We got out of the car after I was crying, hugging her. She stood up to my father, and I watched him get physical with her. She has bruises by the time he was done, and I was crying harder than I ever was. My mother worked night shift on the weekends, and after a particularly terrible night, she came to pick us up around noon. My father told his girlfriend, "Great, you ruined my weekend with my kids. when in fact he scared me shitless. I ended up pissing myself a little bit from the thought of it. This was 2015, cops wasn't called for some reason. Another incident was in late 2016 or early 2017. He took us out around 10 at night to visit a friend of his. There would be a bonfire. He promised me that there would be kids out there my age, which of course was a lie. So we went out there and they were country people, incredibly kind but incredibly drunk. There was a good sized bonfire. I was getting tired. It was midnight. So I went to my father and asked him if we could head home. His response was, "Why won't you let me have fun with my friends?" Or something along the lines of that. It was probably much worse. My mother was at work, so I texted her and asked for my aunt's number. She called instead. Tearful, I answered every question and told her what was going on. She asked to speak to my father, and my father pitched a fit that a toddler would. Yet we ended up going home after begging my mum to pick us up in the morning. Keep in mind, my brother was with me the entire time. The final straw for that time was when he drove my brother and I down to Mason, GA, to see his girlfriend. We were 2 hours north of Mason. We ended up spending the night, and I didn't have a change of clothes. I remember my meal was a bowl of ramen, and that was all I ate. I asked my father if we could leave the TV on, because Attack on Titan was what's on, and it calmed me down. And he said no, because he doesn't want me watching that stuff. So we went to bed. My brother, father, girlfriend, and I were in the same room. I listened to him making a suggestive noise, so I called him out on it. He profusely apologised, but the damage was done. I ended up silently crying myself to sleep that night. Fast forward a good few years of no contact, I finally decided that maybe he changed. It was Rocky without a doubt. We took him to Six Flags on Father's Day because he got him free, and what he told his fiancée was terrible. We were sitting in Lickskillet under the pavilion where stupid cowboys shoot each other. I was eating Dippin' Dots to cool myself in the Georgia heat. My father's fiancée had been out of work due to being physically unable to do much. We were sitting and talking about money issues. My father brought up how broke they were, but less than 5 minutes later wanted to get Six Flag memberships to go out with us more often. He said to my mum, "Well, if she can hurry up and find a job, we might be able to do that." I could feel my heart drop, sensing an issue arising. She was right in front of him and did nothing. My father is 5'10" and lanky. He can't do much because he's so sore all the time. This was 2019. So fast forward to the very end of 2019, my father decided to give me a call. Call went well until he asked if my brother was the same way. My brother is gay. I said yes and asked him why. No reason. I told him I was uncomfortable talking about our sexualities, and he continued on and saying I shouldn't be. I had enough of his torment. I went downstairs where my mother and brother were. I told her quietly to turn down the TV and listen in. I turned my father on speaker, telling him about how uncomfortable I was with this. He said, "Well, you shouldn't be uncomfortable talking about your lifestyle." I had it. I began to get snotty and disrespect him, so he told me to quit it. I said, "I give respect where respect is due." He was pissed, saying I should respect him because he's my father. He isn't entitled to my respect whatsoever. I told him he was on speaker with my mum and brother listening. Silence. I grinned and burst out laughing, calling him a liar and cheater. He said, "We're playing this game." I agreed. He said I lied about him sexually abusing me. In the past, he would tickle me and his hand would go up on my chest or in my crotch. I explained in depth what happened, and he cut me off midway with a single "bye." My final words to him were, "Bye, bitch." After years of torment, I have closure. Not the closure I wished, but closure. I haven't told him he was disowned, but I have ceased all contact with him, numbers blocked and everything. Writing this, I teared up numerous times, but figured it was worth it to post. Our next story is from A Noble Bean. You're still parked there. It's a Saturday evening. We're in the car on the way home, and my husband decides he wants to pick up a few beers. We drive into the parking lot of a liquor store / off license, and as luck would have it, manage to get a spot almost right outside the door. Just as hubby is about to get out and go in, a not inexpensive car pulls up and parks right outside the entrance to the store, in a spot clearly marked as handicap / wheelchair / disabled. 30-something entitled male, EM, gets out and scurries into the store. Things like this annoy my husband, who is an imposing 6'5", important for later. Plus he has a pretty mischievous streak. He goes into the store and picks out his beers, all while keeping an eye on EM. He sees EM has made his selection and is heading to the queue for the register. The store is busy, with a box full of booze in his hands. Hubby had positioned himself so that he reached the queue just ahead of EM. Once EM had settled into the queue, hubby turns around, looks at EM, and in an ever so slightly raised voice asked, "You realise you're parked in a handicap spot?" EM looked up, sees my husband, casts his eyes downwards and starts mumbling something unintelligible, and just continues standing there, I think in the hopes that my husband would go away. A few awkward moments later, my husband spoke again. "You're still parked there." EM looked up at him, then defeatedly put his box down, slunk out of the store and moved his car. Guy behind the register thanked hubby, said he's had huge problems with parking in that spot when they shouldn't, and told him to go get yourself a free can. After he's back in our car, we can see EM casing the lot, looking for a new place to park. Needless to say, we were not in a rush to leave. Wow, what do you think of those stories? I mean, the first one was absolutely crazy, and then this middle one was just incredibly sad, and I hope that person is just having a much better life now, because who needs enemies when you've got a father like that, right? And then the last one, a little bit of malicious compliance in there, would you say? A little bit of revenge. It's much like the store that I'm local to. We've got the same situation going on there. If you did enjoy these stories, would you please consider hitting that like, that subscribe, and maybe that notification bell? If you did enjoy the content, of course, I hope you did, because you've made it this far. And I will see you in the next one. Much love, guys.